This is the MHS Pawdcast, the online radio voice of Metuchen High School.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another edition of the Metuchen High School Podcast, the online radio voice of MHS. I'm Eddie Kalecki. Well, the school year is winding down. A very successful year, might I add, here for the MHS Podcast. 16 shows, 10 live broadcasted sporting events, a great first year, and a thank you to everybody who's helped us out within the school district and the sponsors who have supported us to get equipment. Next Wednesday, we will have a show with new content to wrap up the school year, but what I decided to do was to recap some of the best of this first year. As this episode, we will recap our 5 best interviews of the school year as determined by members of the MHS Podcast. We'll start out with our first ever interview with another newly launched club like we were, the co-creator of the Origami Club, Andrew Lau, a freshman, to discuss that club, and we had him on the very first show. Then we'll go back to our interview with up-and-coming senior musician Jason Whitmore, who was taking an independent study with Mr. Levy and getting a lot of stuff going with his music career. We'll listen back to our interview back in the fall with me and Josh Hyman. He will be on the show once again for the finale. Then we'll look back at our interview with former MHS student, now trainer and coach for the track team, Tyrone Ross. Me and Dylan Manfrey posed him with the question, who is the best athlete to come out of MHS? We'll hear his answer. Then, shifting gears, we'll hear Metuchen's stance on gun control when we talk to Vegas Rockafeller and Alanna Redwood, 2 students that helped lead Metuchen High School's effort following the Parkland shooting. And finally, we'll wrap up the show with my interview with NASCAR President Brent DeWar, who discusses the opportunities within motorsports and the state of the sport. Moving into the interviews now, let's start with our talk with Andrew Lau. Origami, the art of folding paper, a craft done by so many all around the world. But Metuchen High School didn't have a club to allow people to express themselves in this craft. Not until this year, when one freshman decided to take the initiative upon himself and form the Origami Club. And that freshman is Andrew Lau. Andrew, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure.
Alright, so what motivated you to start the Origami Club?
So, I've been doing origami for roughly a couple years now, and I decided that once I joined Metuchen High School, then it will be my initiative to try to start the club. And in high school, you really have so many more opportunities and stuff that you can do, and one of them would be to found a club. So, with the help of a couple friends, I was able to found a club and gain a small following in it. I also have a lot of friends that are really interested in the club, and that's why I was really motivated to start the Origami Club.
Alright, so I went to one of your meetings, and I saw that there were 3 different things that may happen at club meetings. What are those?
So, obviously, many types of clubs like these have an open workshop where you are able to express your creativity and ideas in whatever craft is in that club. So obviously in origami, you'll be able to do many different origami creations and crafts in the Origami Club. So we provide many different materials, different styles of paper, different sizes of paper, and many different instructions, so you can do whatever you want, basically. If you know what to do, if you're a more advanced origami crafter, then you will be able to craft whatever your imagination limits you to. One of the other activities we do is a team building competition, and this is basically when we form teams that try to create a specific origami model the fastest, and after that we judge the different origami models, which is based on accuracy and speed. The winning team will receive a prize. Occasionally, we also use giant pieces of paper to fold basically giant models of different origami pieces. For example, we are planning to build a huge dragon model with a big piece of paper in one of the following meetings.
So I have another question for you. So you guys are going to be creating some very exciting things like that dragon you said. How do you plan on displaying your creations?
Actually, our advisor, Mrs. Cotto, was planning on creating sort of a little cabinet or using one of the already shown cases near the office in order to show off our creations, because we want other people to see what we are able to do in Origami Club. And this really also shows other people our potential and will possibly interest other people into joining our club.
So if anyone has any questions about the club, who should they see?
So, I am the founder of the club, and I feel like that I have enough experience to answer a lot of basic questions, which are mostly about the types of folds, and how you do this, and how to fold different items, because origami instructions can be very, very complicated. So, if somebody needs help on that, I can try to interpret the instructions for them. If I can't interpret them, I have one of my co-founders, Jocelyn Chow, is very good at interpreting these instructions, possibly even better than me, and will probably fix it for you.
Now, I am not a great origami person myself, so I am wondering, for other people like me, do you need certain skill levels to be a part of the club?
No, you do not. We try to interest people of all ages in the high school and of all skill levels in order to gain the biggest following we can get. If we only attract, for example, advanced people, we might only have less than 5 or even 10 or even 5 people in our club. But if we have beginners, intermediate people, and advanced people in our club, then we can have possibly a couple dozen people in our club, and that's what we really want.
So one last question before you go. What are your plans for the future of the Origami Club?
So the Origami Club has just started. We currently only have 2 meetings so far, and this really paves a solid road for our future. So one thing we're planning to do is to try to gain more followers by, for example, advertising, putting more posters up around the school, and, for example, displaying our creations. So that's one of our plans for the future, and possibly try to make revisions and changes to the club that some people might find more interesting. We're always open to suggestions, so if you have one, please contact us immediately.
All right, so the Origami Club meets every Friday after school in room 122. Thank you for joining us, Andrew, and good luck with the club.
Thank you, Eddie.
Welcome back to the Metuchen High School podcast, the radio voice of Metuchen High School. I'm Eddie Kalecki.
And I'm Josh Hyman.
It's always good to have a career path set early in life, and that is exactly what our next guest has. An aspiring musician and senior at Metuchen High School, Jason Whitmore. Jason, welcome to the MHS Podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
All right, so first question. When was it that you realized that you wanted to be a musician?
I wouldn't say it was one specific moment, more of a gradual realization. For a while, like maybe until I was like 11, I liked music as much as anyone. But was pretty content to listen to whatever came on, whatever I heard, like on the radio, on school buses and stuff. I think, let's see, I got a guitar for Christmas, I think when I was 10, and until that point, I didn't think playing the instrument was much more complicated than like playing Guitar Hero, and I was confused as to why this guitar had like strings and not buttons, and I figured it out eventually, and like learned a few chords. Like GarageBand, the recording software, has like these built-in guitar lessons that you can use, which I used to help me learn. And also my dad played guitar, and so I was sort of surrounded by his music growing up, and so I guess getting a guitar and slowly learning it sort of like awakened a musical sense that I'd sort of been developing without realizing it. And then, I fell in love with like the Beatles in middle school and Joni Mitchell, and started learning how to play their songs, and then slowly just started expanding my music tastes, and till the point where it became most of what I thought about, which is now.
So you said you like the Beatles and Joni Mitchell, so who are some of your musical influences?
Well, there's those two. If we want to talk about biggest musical influences on this particular project, those two are big ones. Brian Eno, a famous producer from the 1970s, is also a huge influence for me, and somebody I've been listening to a lot recently. A lot of underground folkier artists. Little Kid is a small, very little-known band that has had a lot of influence on me recently. Arcade Fire is a big one. They're sort of anthemic, I don't know how to pronounce that word. Their sound is sort of something that I like to go for a lot. It's just sort of like a big sort of wall of sound of a lot of different rock instrumentation and synths and stuff. That sort of sound is something I like to go for. I find it really powerful.
Well, I've learned that now you practice every day with Mr. Levy, so tell us about what brought you guys together.
I joined the school's house band when I was in 9th grade, not at his request, at a student's, but so I met him very early on in my high school career, and I don't know, we just sort of, we've just always seen each other pretty constantly since I was a freshman, even though I didn't have him for a class properly until last year. But we've known each other since I was 14 or 15. So, I don't know. I've always liked him. I always thought he was pretty cool. And it was just cool to find a teacher I could like talk to music and just other things about from early on in going to high school. It helped me to feel at home. And yeah, it's super great to finally be getting to do this project with him because we've been talking about it since I was a sophomore.
So what is it like getting to practice and perfect your skills on a daily basis at school?
It's pretty wonderful. I wouldn't say there's a lot of practicing that goes into it. It's more a performance and like let's get some work done environment. But it's really great to like come into this room every day and he says, well, what are we doing today? And I can say, we're laying down a bass line, we're laying down this guitar line, we're doing vocals, we're editing this track, we're doing something. And generally by the end of the 45 minutes, it's done and we feel accomplished and closer to the end of this project. Yeah.
So you mentioned to the end of this project. What are some of your future plans with this project?
Well, the album is intended to be done around the beginning of May. It'll probably have 6 or 7 tracks on it. And there should be an album release party. It might be at the Old Franklin Schoolhouse. It might be somewhere else. But there will be some sort of live performance of the album and probably some other material as well. And hopefully we get a good amount of attendance for that. And we'll release the album, on CD and on digital, like on Spotify and iTunes and stuff, and hopefully get a good amount of traction for it. There is some dream of doing some sort of music video, creating some sort of like visual media attention for it on YouTube or otherwise.
Very cool. So, once again, that was senior here at Metuchen High School and aspiring musician Jason Whitmore. Jason, thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome back to the MHS Podcast. I'm Eddie Kalegi, joined by Dylan Manfred. So over the years, Metuchen High School has produced numerous notable alumni. From athletes to musicians, to cartoonists and magicians, the graduating class is stacked. But today, we're going to shift our focus towards the athletes and determine who the best athlete is to ever come out of MHS. To do so, we are thrilled to be joined by an alumni of Metuchen High School himself, Tyrone Ross. Tyrone, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, gentlemen.
All right, so let's talk to you a little bit about yourself and what drives you to keep coming back to MHS to help the team train, the track team, of course. What do you feel is the best thing runners can do to stay focused when they aren't training?
So the reason I keep coming back, to be completely frank, is Coach Holland is like a second father to me. So when I am dealing with struggles or concerns or just, want to go back and see him, I head over and see him. And I'm also 10 minutes away, so I'm literally right up the street in Woodbridge. So, and I just like being around the kids. I'm proud to say that literally I've trained at Metuchen every year since I've graduated. I've been around every single graduating class since I've left. And I don't think there's too many people that can say that. So now it's starting to get blurry between who graduated when or whatever, which made this whole thing exciting about talking about the best athlete. And as far as what runners could do to stay focused off of the track, and as Dylan will tell you, and I've had some conversations with him, is I was a little maniacal when I was in high school. So my whole bedroom was my goals. And I remember taking a piece of a broken hurdle from the school and writing the school record on it, which I eventually, was blessed enough to break. But I think one of the things that you can do, and it's funny, I would have given this answer differently a long time ago, but now I think the best thing that you could do, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, is actually get away from it. Just go do other things. Get away from the sport. Don't think about it, because, I could have this argument with people or debate, but I think track mentally is the hardest sport that anyone can do. Mentally, not physically, but I think mentally it breaks you down. So I think to get away from it, go have some fun, be with family, find another hobby, so this way when you come back to it, you're fresh and ready to focus on, stepping in between those white lines.
Very interesting.
Yeah, you definitely got to prevent the burnout. You can't burn out after 4 years if you really love this. If you really love this sport.
Absolutely.
All right, so now let's shift our focus to really why you're on and how we came to talk about the MHS historic athletes. So I know you were talking about it on Twitter with some of the other MHS alum. How did this debate really first get brought up, and what made you think about the best athletes in MHS history?
I'm going to tell you exactly what made me think about it. I was on Instagram, and I saw DeWar Miller post that he was retiring, essentially. He was no longer going to play football. He was retiring from the Arena League. And I coached DeWan in middle school when he was at Edgar. And I remember going to hollering, and I'm like, this kid is different. You don't see kids like this walking around Metuchen every 3-4 years. Like, this kid is a generational talent. He's like, slow down. Let him get up here first and figure it out. But so we've always had conversations. Those of us who graduated, and obviously you think about the folks who are. And it'll be the same with you guys, right? When you're 4 years in high school, and if you go back to when I was at Metuchen, 8th grade was in the high school as well. So it was 8 through 12. So, but that time, so that's literally 5 years. You come across a lot of different athletes and people who come in before you. So around your time frame that you were there, everyone has their favorite, right? Or the person that was all state when you were there or whatever. So we've always had this debate about whether it should be the most decorated, whether it's truly the most athletic, or who played the most sports, or whatever the case may be. So it was really cool to see that you guys had the podcast. I'm like, it would be interesting to see what you guys thought of what you've heard, around school, and then, some of the things that are said from those of us that have been out and graduated, even going back to Artie Flaherty and Frank Bruno and all those guys. So it was good to get some dialogue from folks. I posted on Facebook last night, and we had some pretty good debate.
Yeah, I saw some names come up. Blackshear, who and Melagrana, who you ran with in that 4x4. Even Steve Deppy, who I always see you talking about, on social media with. I know you're very close with him. I think, when I was a freshman, running track, I really looked up to Tyler Velosin and Mikhail Skolnick. The two of them really got me interested in the 400. And then, I ran it. And then I knew about you, Coach Ross, and then you came in and taught me a lot. And, obviously I look up to you immensely. Even now, as, just as a person, you're very an inspirational person. But I think it was those two guys in particular, my freshman year, that I really looked up to.
On my end, I didn't know a lot because I'm a freshman, so I ended up doing a lot of research on this topic, and I came down to 3 names. As you mentioned earlier,
okay.
DeWan Miller, who played football, basketball, and track here at the high school, and was successful in all 3 sports, and was setting all kinds of records. I've also got to look at Chris Edmonds, the soccer player. She got an invite to the U.S. women's national team, and that is such an impressive thing on its own. And then the final person is Marcus Blakely, who, if many people don't know, he is a basketball player, and he ended up making it, and he did not play in a game, but with the Rockets. He was suited up for a game back in 2012 in the NBA. So those are my three. Coach Ross, who are yours? Who do you think is the most historic athlete in Metuchen High School history?
Oh, great question. So, just a little bit of clarity here. Now, I have come to my top three, and I was thinking about this. So, I want to be clear. To be fair, I wanted to make it what people did only their 4 years in MHS. Okay. Not if they signed a pro contract, so only what they did in 4 years. So all state, all county, national championships if they won any, All-American, whatever the case may be. So only those 4 years. Mm-hmm. And Marcus Blakely was a talent, by the way, but I definitely, he's not in my top three. So if I had to go top three based on just what that individual did in 4 years, and this is where, again, I got into an argument with some folks whether it was most decorated or whatever the case may be. I think without a shadow of a doubt, I think DeWar Miller is in the top three. Where people want to place him, it doesn't matter. But, I mean, you score 1,000 points in basketball, you break my 200 record, you run the second fastest 400 in Metuchen High School history, which the 400 meters in Metuchen High School is the most successful event in any sport. Don't ever be told differently. In that high school, it is the deepest and most successful event in that high school, and he has the second fastest time ever run. That's ridiculous. And he did it as a junior, and we all know he was all everything in football. So it's inarguable that he's in the top three. Kristen Edmonds is another one. I actually, again, I saw Kristen run a 58 split on a 4x4 to 400, and she didn't like track. She just did track because it was just something she could do. She wanted to. She could hold every sprint record if she wanted it. She just didn't. It wasn't her thing. What I didn't know, I only knew that she was a great soccer player and that she was really, she was a good runner. But her mother told me last night that she was almost 1,000-point scorer in basketball as well. Adding that to it, again, she was already in the conversation. So I think next when you go to three, I think that's when it starts to get a little dicey. I think Reggie Blackshear, I think, has to be in the conversation. He still holds records. I still have to do some research with Holler, and if I'm correct, I believe he won an individual national title in track, so still legendary. So I think he would probably be in my top three, but I think there's so many people that can fight to get in that third spot. Mrs. Gazda was a monster. Artie Flaherty was a 2,000-point scorer in basketball. Nick Zanetto was an awesome wrestler. Sean Moyle, who was there when I was there, probably one of the most talented people I've ever been around in my life. Probably the best football player to ever play at Metuchen High School, if you ask me.
So many great alumni.
It's funny that all of these...
I'm sorry?
So many great alumni.
So many. It's unbelievable. Frank Bruno, who was a really good football player, and shot putter on the track team. I mean, the list is endless. Jenny Graff was an absurd javelin thrower.
You have that nice picture of her in the
multiple media champions winner. She was really good at soccer. The Makos family. It's nuts for a little small school. I mean, the talent that has come out, and I want to make this last point because I don't want to drone on as your show. But here's the other criterion that I said. If you take that person, and to be fair, right? I don't want to say it's easy to play varsity at Metuchen, but let's be honest, it's not Piscataway, it's not Old Bridge, it's not Elizabeth where you got 4,000 kids.
Yeah.
True.
But if you took that person out of Metuchen High School and you put them in another school where there's 2,000, 3,000 kids, would they be just as dominant?
Absolutely not.
And I think, yeah, exactly. And I think those three people, if you took them and you put them in a Group 4 setting, I think they would be almost as good as they were at Metuchen. So that's kind of how I looked at it.
Coach Ross, thank you for joining us here on the Metuchen High School podcast.
Thank you for having me. I love what you guys are doing. And let me just say this really quickly. Dylan, I am so proud of you. Out of all the people I've ever met, you are a hard worker. I always knew it. And no matter I knew if you took that hard work to anything else that you did, you would be super successful. Congrats to the both of you. And I look forward to hearing the result of this. You guys have a great day.
Thank you, Coach Ross. Appreciate it.
Insurance. It's a commodity. It shouldn't be an impulse buy. Purchasing the right insurance takes time, and it must be fitted for your goals and your lifestyle. Farmers Insurance likes to do it right. They invite you to sit back, have some coffee, and relax. They listen to your needs, desires, and dreams, and shape an insurance policy just for you. An old-fashioned take on insurance? Possibly, but it's been working for agents and clients alike for years. Visit your local agent, Ed Van Eckert, today at 54 Pearl Street right here in Metuchen, or call 732-548-4444 for a free quote. Ed's #1 concern is Metuchen. Once again, that's 732-548-4444 or at 54 Pearl Street in Metuchen. Farmers, making the brainy borough smarter about insurance.
We are farmers. Bum, ba-dum, bum, 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 bum.
Having trouble seeing the board in class? Do you need safety glasses for your school sport? If you answered yes to either of these questions, head over to Optique Unique, the eyeglass store at 406 Main Street in Metuchen. Optique Unique does it all. Not only do they offer eyewear for all ages, they also sell sport-specific safety glasses for kids and adults. Call them at 732-321-2020. That's 732-321-2020, or visit OptiqueUnique.com. Do you want to build character, build confidence, or even build yourself? All that and more can be accomplished at the Black Belt Institute at 23 New Street, right here in Metuchen. Students of all ages have been able to learn respect, discipline, fitness, and self-defense from their experienced instructors for over 20 years. Whether you're an adult looking for stress reduction or know someone young who has interest in Taekwondo, the Black Belt Institute is the place to go. The Institute takes a fun approach at teaching the rules of self-defense, instilling in their students an I-can-do-it attitude. Interested in taking a class? Call them at 732-205-9797 or visit their website at blackbeltinst.com. Once again, that's 732-205-9797 or blackbeltinst.com. The Black Belt Institute, Metuchen's leader in martial arts and fitness.
Let's give a thank you to some of our sponsors. Thank you to What's the Scoop, Reflections on Main, the Main Street Barbershop, and the Metuchen Savings Bank. None of this would be possible without the help of these businesses.
Welcome back to the Metuchen High School podcast, the online radio voice of Metuchen High School. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Josh Hyman.
Nearly 2 months ago, 19-year-old Nicholas Cruz opened fire at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, killing 17, including 14 students, 2 teachers, and the athletic director. Following this, demonstrations arose across the country, and some of the most prominent voices are those of fellow high school students. Today we will hear from a couple of those voices who are taking the step towards ending gun violence right here at Metuchen High School. It's great to welcome freshman Vegas Rockafeller and junior Alanna Redwood. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
All right, so first I want to ask each of you to tell us why you decided to take action and become involved with this.
Well, I decided to take action because I did not want another school shooting. I did not want one more student to die in their schools, which are deemed to be safe learning places. They can't be places where students can be scared of somebody coming into their school and open firing. So I felt like I had to take action to solve the problem.
All right, Alanna, is it similar to Vegas's approach?
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way, and like I've been politically engaged for a while, especially politically engaged for about a year now. Not so much when I was younger, and when I saw the impact that these high school students were having, I realized that this was a place where my voice was really powerful and where I could really make a change, and I definitely wanted to do that.
Alright, so how did you guys get this started, and what adults and other people in the town have assisted you?
So it was kind of funny how we got it started. So I was in a car ride home from my grandparents, and my mom got an email about possibly students doing stuff in town. So I was like, yeah, let's do it at the high school. So then I got some freshmen involved, and then Alanna was getting other like juniors and seniors involved, and then we were like, well, there's two things, let's just join them together. And then Alanna started a group me, and now we have about 250 members in that. So it's kind of like coming together and then making a great.
And you mentioned 250 people, so you've gotten a lot of people involved in this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so as you guys remember, we had the moment of silence back in March and the sale of t-shirts, so what else do you plan on doing?
Well, there's going to be the walkout on April 20th. It'll be 17 minutes. We're having it a little bit later in the day than the national walkout because there will be park testing. And then after school on the same day, there's going to be a march to Martin Luther King Park and a rally there.
Very interesting. All right, so now obviously the gun control issue is very controversial, and there's differing viewpoints on it, so I want to get some of yours. So the first question I want to ask you guys is, do you feel that the gun control debate is more about politics or ethics?
Oh, gosh. Yeah. I think it's definitely a combination of the two. I mean, it's such a screamy debate, but it's also a very policy-heavy debate. Like, a lot of gun control policy should depend on statistics and facts, but, I mean, not entirely due to the fault of the population. We don't really pay much attention to that, partially because, like, for example, the CDC was, until very recently, banned from researching gun control. But I think it should be about, I think it is about both, and it should be about both, but often in the wrong ways.
All right, so people often point fingers about the subject, and obviously, since politicians are the people who make the laws, they can be the center of the blame. But I want to ask you guys if you feel, because this is something that I always think, that there are movies, there's TV shows, there's video games that promote gun violence and stuff like that. Do you think that could be part of the blame? And if not, is there any other centers of the blame aside from politicians?
I'm not 100% sure whether or not that is part of the problem, but I could see it definitely being the problem, although some studies have shown that it's not, and others have shown that it is. So it's really kind of controversial in that aspect.
So, there are reports that there are over 115 million guns in the United States. 1/3 of them are in the United States illegally. If laws are passed to ban certain weapons, what would happen with the 50 million out there legally? What else can be done to completely end the risk of a mass shooting?
Well, to end the risk of a mass shooting is very challenging. It won't happen very quickly. It takes a lot of time. For example, in Australia or Japan, it took a long time to reduce the amount of gun violence. So if in New Jersey, in the New Jersey State Assembly, we passed 6 gun control bills that went from cop killer bullets, which are bullets that can pierce through like 46 layers of Kevlar, to background checks for like personal gun sales. So definitely taking steps there and passing all those bills, and then in states, and then having other states follow it, and then eventually national, we can eventually get to stopping it.
And as to the thing about what would happen with illegal guns, I mean, that depends on the policy. Like, we are not legislators. That's not for us to decide. We can have our opinions. Like, personally, I don't think that forcing people to forfeit their guns would be very effective, even if it is, regardless of what you think about whether or not it's the right thing to do. I just don't think it would work. But yeah, there are a lot of differing opinions on what should happen there.
So, and for somebody in the school who wants to speak out against gun violence but is afraid, what would you say to them, and how would you convince them to let their voice be heard?
I would say, please come to our meeting. We have a meeting on Thursday, which is tomorrow, April 12th. So if you want your voice to be heard, please come out tomorrow. Share your voice. We're open to everything, and then we'll decide on what would work best. So please come out tomorrow.
All right, so where is the meeting tomorrow?
Tomorrow, our meeting will be in the cafeteria, and we will have a special guest his name is Diego, and he's actually from Parkland, so we would be Skyping into him, and he will talk to us about his experiences and kind of like give us a pep talk and stuff.
All right, well, you guys, along with a few others, are doing a really great job with this, and it's very admirable that high school students are speaking out against something that hurt high schoolers, and now we've got other high schoolers going with them and helping them. So best of luck to you guys continuing this.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the Metuchen High School Podcast, the online radio voice of MHS. I'm Eddie Kalegi. It's not often that we get the pleasure to talk to someone influential in the professional sports world here on the MHS Podcast. Today, however, we did with Dorian Miller, and we have yet another guest. To discuss sports management, how he got his job, and the state of the sport, it's an honor to be joined by current NASCAR President Brent DeWar. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks a lot, Eddie. I'm really pleased to be able to join you and your fellow students, and look forward to talking NASCAR with you.
All right, so being that we are in high school, one of the most important things forefront in the mind of students is the career path. And this correlates perfectly with what you're doing, because we just recently at the school had a workshop about sports journalism and sports management. For those who don't know, tell us a little bit about how you first got your start in NASCAR and how you climbed the ranks all the way to NASCAR president.
Sure. There's many entry points in sports management. So I can talk about the motorsports side of the business, which is what I grew up in. So I started on the automotive side, and I started my career at General Motors and worked on the career development and car development of cars. It was a great career, kind of every boy and girl's dream to get to work on design and developing cars. And in those responsibilities, as I climbed up through the management ranks at Chevrolet, we also raced, and so I had the opportunity of working around the world, the United States and Canada and Brazil and Europe and Asia, and in all those markets we had racing series, and we raced our cars. And so I knew NASCAR very well, along with the other series. And when I left General Motors, I was living in New York City, and one of my clients was NASCAR, and one thing led to another, and ended up, even though I was very familiar with NASCAR, I joined them 5 years ago as the chief operating officer to help them with some important transitional time in the history of the company. We're just celebrating our 70th year, Eddie, of NASCAR. And then this past year, I became the 4th president in the history of the company. So I took the automotive pathway, but there's many ways through engineering, through marketing, through communications, that you can enter into sports, any of the sports, whether that's the stick and ball sports or the motorsports like NASCAR.
So now at this point, I want to ask you, since you have reached this level, what are some of your day-to-day responsibilities as the president of NASCAR?
So what I do is there's really two parts of my position. One is keeping the sport running, right? So all aspects. We have a very long season in NASCAR. So we started in President's Day weekend with the Daytona 500, and we run 36 weekends throughout the season, ending just prior to Thanksgiving in Homestead, Miami. So it's a long season, so there's lots of things happen, but we go racing every week. So under my responsibility is all the commercial operations of the sport, the sponsors, the race teams, getting them ready. And then the second part is the competition side of the sport. And I have a team in research and development that works on, the race teams and the car development all the way to, we're going to race in Kansas this weekend. So it's very hectic. I work about 100 hours a week. So it's pretty 7 days a week. It keeps me pretty busy. And I've got a young daughter who's 11, who's become a huge NASCAR fan. So trying to find the right balance to all those aspects. So that's the role. That's what my role is.
Well, you mentioned your daughter, and NASCAR, as I know, as I'm a big fan of the sport, it's a big family sport. You start with the Frances, and then with the drivers, the Waltrips, the Pettys, the Allisons, the Earnhardts, and even with you, even your daughter getting interested in the sport.
Yeah, it is totally family, and I think that's one of the things. So when I grew up as a kid, my dad was a terrific guy. He was a high school principal. He was the least car guy you would ever meet. Just an awesome guy. And so I didn't have any influences in my family that got me interested in racing, but I had a friend, and we didn't have a local short track in my area where I grew up in Western Canada, and we had a drag strip, and so I went to the drag strip with a friend of mine, and I went with his family and his uncles and relatives, and I got hooked, and then that gave me the bug for racing, and went to college, and they were interviewing on campus, and that's when I applied to, because I realized the people that made the Corvettes was General Motors, and I love Corvettes, and so that's how the cycle came together. So it's really about going with a friend, going with a family member that gets you excited about racing, because you can watch it on TV, you can listen to it on the radio, but the sights, the sounds, the speed, the emotion really only happens when you go to the track. And we encourage go to a race, you'll see it much better on TV, and you'll hear it much better on radio, and you have a chance of becoming a fan for life. So for us, everything centers around the track experience and the actual event venue. It's like a tailgate party, like what you see in a football game, but our NASCAR fans will come like 3 to 4 days in advance. So it's in some cases like Pocono, it's almost a 7-day tailgate.
And that's something that the basic person who doesn't know much about NASCAR doesn't realize, is that it's a full weekend, starting with practice, qualifying, the lower series, and then finally you get to the Monster Energy Cup race.
Yeah, so we have something for everybody. So there's lots of activity on the track. We build up these big midways. So think of it like a state fair or a big event, and there's so many things to do and to activate. It really is a cultural experience. NASCAR is an American brand created in 1948, and we really try to bring that event experience every single weekend across the country. So think of it like a Super Bowl, and we have a Super Bowl size type event every single weekend, and we finished over Delaware last weekend. We picked up everything. It's like a logistics model, and everybody moves west, and we race in Kansas 4 days later. And it's quite an interesting way to make it happen and to bring the excitement to the fans and the marketplace.
So before we focus on the NASCAR season, one more thing I want to ask you about your position. What is your favorite part about being NASCAR president? And on the other hand, what is the biggest challenge?
So obviously my favorite part is I'm the fan first, and so I definitely don't ever want to forget that, because sometimes you can let the business and you can let the day-to-day get in the way. So we always try to look through the lens of being a fan, and with that, interacting with fans. So I'm very active on social media. That's how we met, through social media, and I do a tweet up at every track, and I try to meet the fans. And so we have really deep research and analytics to understand where to guide the sport as we grow, try to grow the sport in the future. We look at it from a fan's perspective. So I use the personal connection with the fans to validate the research that we get from our syndicated research or private research studies, and so it kind of keeps it in checks and balance. I would say the biggest challenge, Eddie, is just balancing time in life. And I'm a family guy, and my daughter came to 15 races with me last year, but that means there's 21 races she didn't. And so just trying to find the balance of the family, the travel, those aspects. I love it. I wouldn't change it. My family is very supportive of what I do, but that's probably my biggest challenge is just trying to make it all balanced.
Mm-hmm. So at this point, we will shift towards NASCAR, the season itself. We're about 3 months into the season, as Brent said. Dover was just last weekend, and we're heading to Kansas this weekend. From your end, how's the season going so far?
It's interesting. I think we did some very interesting changes this year. So this is year 2 of the stage racing. And so for your fans that aren't aware, we very much like other sports, we broke the sport up into 3 segments, and that's been working well. It's allowed us, our fans want to see green flag racing. They want to see the race in its entirety. So it gave us a chance to break for commercial breaks like other sports. Motorsports, unfortunately, traditionally breaks away from live action to put in the commercials, and we need the commercials to have the balance. So I think year 2 of the stage racing has been really great. What's new this year, Eddie, is we have 10 incredible young drivers, the most in our history, coming into the sport in the last couple of years. And so they're replacing some of our very famous drivers, whether it's Tony Stewart or Jeff Gordon or Dale Earnhardt Jr. or Carl Edwards. And so this battle between the veterans and the young guns that we refer to them, it's very exciting. And so we're starting to see that play on the track. So after the first 11 races, the veterans are winning. They're beating the young guns so far with some pretty exciting racing on the track. So it's a very interesting time in the history of NASCAR to see this talent. And what's also the second part is when the older drivers, when they got into it, social media is such an important part of society today and communication. And the older drivers, we had to encourage them to do social media. The younger drivers, we don't have to encourage them at all. So they come with their own skills in social media from a very young age. So by the time they get to race with us, we try to encourage them to be careful with their social media, but to be themselves. So it's been a great start to the season.
You know, that is so funny, Brent, because that was the next question I was going to ask you about, because social media, I know, is becoming such an influential part in sports, and it's marketing sports from both an athlete's end and from the league itself. It's becoming more and more important as the years go on.
Absolutely. So I think a lot of marketers, and I used to be a former chief marketing officer of an automotive company, as I mentioned before, and social media was kind of a fad. It was just a developing fad. It's not. It's mainstream media today. It's not a medium for millennials or young folks. It's a medium for all age groups. But I think you'll see that the channel of the social media is different from whether it's Snapchat to Facebook to Twitter. Each one of them has their own audience and their own voices. So we try to make sure that we can amplify the sport and communicate with our fans through the various mediums. No different than NBC, linear television, or Fox in a traditional mode. Social media is here to stay. What we're all learning is how to manage through that to make sure you can communicate properly and appropriately through the channels.
Now, two more things. The first thing I want to talk about here is, as you said, the youth movement, but also not just in the Cup Series and the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series, and with the new Dash for Cash rules that only Xfinity drivers can participate in Dash for Cash races, it's making an opportunity, it seems, for more and more young drivers to present themselves for the future.
Yeah, so that was a really big decision for this year. We've been migrating in this direction. So the Xfinity Series, and for your fans don't realize that's the second series. These are development series leading up to the Monster Cup Series. And so for both the Truck Series and Xfinity, we call it where names are made. And so we've had so many young drivers make it to the top level so quickly. We took a conscious effort to restrict the ability of other racers to race in that series. And one of the mechanisms was Dash for Cash, and then none of the playoffs. And so it really has allowed us to understand and allow the fans to get to know these drivers a lot better, to keeping the Cup drivers out. I think you're going to see, Eddie, it's been very positive this year. I think we'll see more in that direction as we take further steps as we go forward, to look even further, to have further restrictions against the Cup drivers. But that's still in the development phase. We're doing research right now with our fan council to understand that a little bit better. But we're very happy with how it's turned out this year. And similarly in the Truck Series, it's very competitive. For the families, we have young children 12 and under are free at the races for both the Cup and Xfinity in all the racetracks across the country, and special prices for the Cup levels for kids as part of that operation of marketing to try to get more kids and families to the track.
And it's not just racing on the track. Now, over the past few years, we have seen iRacing become big in the racing platform. iRacing now, for people who don't know, iRacing is, there's NASCAR, there's all kinds of different racing series, and it's a online racing simulator. The graphics and just the realism is incredible, and it's really helping drivers develop.
Absolutely, it's incredible, and it's so real. And so the math data is exactly to the point with the tracks, and the feel almost to the same level. And look at one of our young champions, William Byron. He never raced like many kids in go-karts coming up. He didn't race in a car until 15, but he was an iRacer and got to learn all of the technique in iRacing. And today we just launched an iRacing league, youth racing league today. So we encourage your followers to look into it, and if they're interested, they can join our iRacing youth league. And that's a way to get into the sport, and without, maybe you don't have a parent or an uncle or a friend that has access to a car, you can still get that feel for the racing. Doesn't mean you'll go on to become a professional race car driver, but the simulation is still real. It's not a video game. It's an advanced simulation racing, and then it's really, really exciting. It's still real. In fact, I can do the video games, like Heat Evolution. I play with my daughter. But the simulator is so real, I actually get dizzy in it. My eye-hand coordination, it throws me off. And so it really gives you that sensation of feeling of what it's like to be a race car driver.
All right, that's about all the time we have. NASCAR President Brent DeWar, thanks again for joining us. Best of luck through the rest of the season.
Thanks, Eddie. Hope we can do this again.
Yep.
This is the MHS Pawdcast, the online radio voice of Metuchen High School.